Before he died, Barry Sheene named the 5 riders he loved the most. Barry Sheene cheated death at 175 miles per hour and laughed about it on television the next day. 2 world championships, a face that sold magazines, and a personality so big it made motorcycle racing famous. But on March 10th, 2003, cancer took him at 52. Before he died, Sheene named the 5 riders he truly loved, and one of them was the rival everyone thought he hated. Barry Sheene wasn't just a motorcycle racer. He was a rock star who happened to ride bikes. Born in Holborn, London on September 11, 1950, Sheene grew up in his father Frank's motorcycle workshop, where engines were louder than conversations and grease was thicker than blood. He won back-to-back 500 cubic centimeter world championships in 1976 and 1977. But his fame went beyond racing. He dated supermodels and appeared on chat shows, drove Rolls-Royces to the circuit, and survived a crash at Daytona in 1975 at 175 miles per hour that broke nearly every bone below his waist. 27 fractures. And he came back because Barry Sheene didn't know how to stay down. Number 5. Phil Reed. The man most people assumed Sheene despised. And for years, that was true. Reed was old school, calculated, political. He played the paddock like a chessboard and made enemies everywhere he went. But Sheene saw something in Reed that the public never understood: survival. Reed had raced through the most dangerous era in motorcycle history. Circuits with no barriers, no runoff areas, riders dying every season. And Reed survived all of it, not with talent alone, but with an intelligence that Sheene secretly admired. In their later years, just long after the rivalries had cooled, Sheene admitted that Reed taught him something no other rider could: how to play the long game, how to protect yourself in a sport that wanted to kill you. Sheene was wild by nature, fearless, reckless at times. But watching Reed navigate the politics and dangers of Grand Prix racing with cold precision gave Sheene a blueprint for longevity. And when you've had 27 bones broken in a single crash, longevity becomes more valuable than any trophy. Sheene loved Reed not for who he was in public, but for what he represented behind closed doors. A survivor in a sport that buried its heroes. Number 4. Steve Parrish. Not the most famous name in racing, but the most important name in Barry Sheene's life outside of family. Parrish was Sheene's teammate, his traveling partner, his best friend. Yet they drove to races together in Sheene's Rolls-Royce, laughing louder than the engine. Parrish wasn't as fast as Sheene. He knew it. Sheene knew it. Everyone knew it. But Sheene never cared about Parrish's lap times. He cared about his loyalty. In a paddock full of men who would smile at you on Sunday and steal your sponsor on Monday, Parrish was the one man Sheene trusted completely. When Sheene crashed at Daytona in 1975, and the doctors were pulling metal out of his legs, Parrish was at the hospital. When Sheene won his world championships, Parrish was in the garage celebrating like he had won them himself. Sheene loved Parrish because in a life filled with fame, money, and chaos, Parrish was the one thing that stayed real. And for a man whose public image was built on glamour, having someone who treated him like a normal human being was worth more than any championship. Number 3. Giacomo Agostini, the Italian legend with 15 world championships and an elegance that Sheene deeply respected. On paper, these two should have been enemies. Agostini was the old guard. Sheene was the new generation. But there was a mutual recognition between them that transcended competition. Agostini had dominated an era when death was part of the entry fee. He had lost friends on circuits that had no business hosting races, and he carried that grief with a dignity that Sheene found extraordinary. When Sheene first arrived in Grand Prix racing, Agostini was already in his twilight years. But the Italian treated the young Englishman with a warmth that surprised the paddock. Agostini saw in Sheene the same fire that had driven him through 15 championships. That recognition meant everything to Sheene, because in 1970s, motorcycle racing, respect from Giacomo Agostini was the highest honor a rider could receive. Sheene loved Agostini because Agostini represented what Sheene wanted to become, a man who dominated his era and walked away with his dignity intact. A king who never lost his crown even after he stopped wearing it. But the last two names on this list hit deeper than friendship or respect. These were the two riders who touched Barry Sheene's soul. Number 2, Angel Nieto, the Spanish master of the small classes. 13 world championships in 50 cubic centimeters and 125 cubic centimeters racing. Nieto never raced in the 500 cubic centimeters class. He never had the fame of Sheene or Agostini. But Sheene loved him with a tenderness that surprised everyone who knew the brash Englishman, because Nieto was pure. He raced for the love of racing, not for money, not for fame, not for magazine covers. Nieto grew up poor in Madrid and found a motorcycle the way some people find religion. It saved him, and he repaid that salvation with 13 world titles earned on machines so small that most fans didn't even bother watching. Sheene watched. Sheene saw a man who reminded him why he fell in love with motorcycles in the first place. Before the Rolls-Royces, before the supermodels, before the television cameras, there was a boy in his father's workshop in London who just wanted to ride. Nieto kept that boy alive inside Sheene. Every time they met at a Grand Prix, Nieto would hug Sheene like a brother and talk about motorcycles with an excitement that hadn't faded in 30 years. Sheene loved that energy because fame had taken a lot from Sheene. It had taken his privacy, his peace, his ability to walk through a paddock without cameras following. But it never took his love for riding. And Angel Nieto was the living proof that love for riding could survive anything. Even 13 world championships. When Nieto died in 2017 from a road accident, the sport lost something irreplaceable. And somewhere, Barry Sheene's spirit lost the one friend who understood exactly what the motorcycle meant before it became a career. Number 1, Kenny Roberts. And this is the name that will shock everyone who thinks they know Barry Sheene's story, because Sheene and Roberts were supposed to hate each other. The Englishman versus the American. The playboy versus the cowboy. The man who charmed Europe versus the man who invaded it. They fought on track with an intensity that defined the late 1970s. Roberts dethroned Sheene, took his championships, took his status, and did it with a riding style that Sheene publicly criticized as dangerous and wrong for Grand Prix racing. The media built a war between them. Fans chose sides. The paddock placed bets on who would break first. But behind the cameras, behind the newspaper headlines, behind the rivalry that sold tickets and television rights, something else was happening. Sheene and Roberts were becoming friends. Real friends. The kind built not on convenience, but on mutual recognition. Sheene recognized in Roberts the same thing he saw in his own mirror. A man who refused to be controlled, who fought the establishment, who said what he thought and raced how he wanted regardless of consequences. Roberts was the American version of Barry Sheene, and Sheene was the British version of Kenny Roberts. They were the same man born on different continents. After retirement, their friendship deepened. Phone calls, visits, conversations about racing that lasted hours. When Sheene was diagnosed with cancer and moved to Australia, Roberts stayed in touch until the very end. And before Barry Sheene closed his eyes for the last time on March 10th, 2003, the people closest to him knew one truth the public never fully understood. The rival he fought hardest on the track was the man he loved most off it. Because Barry Sheene didn't love riders who agreed with him. He loved riders who challenged him. And nobody challenged Barry Sheene like Kenny Roberts. Barry Sheene lived louder than anyone who ever raced a motorcycle. 2 championships, 27 broken bones. A smile that never faded even when the pain was unbearable. Phil Reed taught him survival. Steve Parrish gave him loyalty. Agostini gave him respect. Angel Nieto reminded him why he started. And Kenny Roberts gave him the one thing fame never could. A real fight with a real friend. Subscribe for more untold racing stories.